think I'm going first, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay. So good morning. This is Lynn Manion. On behalf of CMU's Traffic 21 and Mobility 21, as well as from the Airport Corridor Transportation Association, welcome to your virtual visit to Pittsburgh's Airport Corridor. We're happy to have you here. Our speakers today are myself. I'm the Executive Director of the Airport Corridor Transportation Association, Lisa K. Schweyer, who is the Program Manager of the Traffic 21 Institute and Mobility 21 National University Transportation Center at Carnegie Mellon University. Also, Sean Chen, he's the Henry Posner and Malloy and Robert and Christine Pietrandia Associate Professor, jointly appointed at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Sean is also the Mobility Data Analytics Director of the Mobility Data Analytics Center at CMU. And finally, Rick Grahn, who is a PhD student in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Carnegie Mellon, working in the Mobility Data Analytics Center. The research focuses on how emerging technologies can be used to improve transportation system performance. And now I just want to tell you a little about the RideACTA shuttle service. I'm not going to read all of it because you can see it on the screen here, but just give you a minute to look at that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa K. Schweyer.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And thank you everyone for being here today to hear about this project. As Lynn said, my name is Lisa K. Schweyer. I work for the Traffic 21 Research Institute and the Mobility 21 National University Transportation Center at Carnegie Mellon University. We're here today to talk about our Smart Mobility Challenge. The Smart Mobility Challenge grew out of the 10+ years of research that we've been doing. We are based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I've worked very closely with the City of Pittsburgh and the Port Authority of Allegheny County to create a globally recognized smart city testbed. And from the lessons that we've learned, we wanted to take those research initiatives and different technologies and to look at how they can be taken from the urban setting and be able to be used or adapted for the suburban and rural areas. So in 2017, we had our first Smart Mobility Challenge, and we had the communities on the screen were included in that challenge, and there was a lot of different research done and ways to improve mobility in those areas. The one that we're talking about today is the second Smart Mobility Challenge, and this just wrapped up, and we were leveraging the Mobility Data Analytics Center, which you'll hear a little bit more about, and worked with North Huntington Township and the RideACTA program. I just wanted to also give a quick commercial for those of you in the area who are in southwestern Pennsylvania and maybe a municipality or public transit operator who would like to submit your mobility problem. We are in the midst of looking for new opportunities to partner with the communities, and we do have an open RFP right now out to the communities asking for these problem statements. I'll post in the chat box the link to that if you would like to learn more. And at this point, on the screen is my contact information and ways to get in touch with us. But I'd like to turn the presentation over to Sean to tell you a little bit more about the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa K. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Sean Qian. Because Rick and I will be jointly presenting some of the research results for you. But I want to just kick off just by giving you a very high-level overview why are we doing this and why this is so interesting and how this is different from other existing studies in the nation. So, you know, we're at the time that transportation is witnessing a lot of the emerging technologies coming up into transportation industry, right? One of the very interesting and also very crucial problem is how to get people from A to B, especially those vulnerable groups who need to get access to jobs and healthcare services and groceries and all these things. And traditional transportation, public transportation system can provide a way to get people access to these facilities, in infrastructure or jobs. But the thing is, it could be very likely to be very inefficient because the time, the departure, the bus arrivals could be 30 minutes and 1 hour, and then the stop setup are miles away or half a mile away apart. It's not really so convenient. A limit bounded by the cost, right? On the other hand, is that you can also drive, or maybe you can call for Uber services, Lyft services, which is almost door to door, but it's very, very expensive. So some folks are really captive to public transportation. So that really, so the trigger prompts the problem where can we provide a very efficient, low cost and accessible transportation mobility service, just like what RideACTA is doing, in the sense that we connecting people from their origin or their destination as the first mile, last mile services to a main hub of public transportation system, which provides very efficient, high frequency kind of services. If we can connect people from not entire journey, but the first mile, last mile services, and it will likely to improve the accessibility, and especially for people who are captive to public transportation. So that's really the background. And then we have been talking to RideACTA for quite a long time, and RideACTA is really, really one of the very forward-thinking nonprofit organization that has been implementing this first mile, last mile services in the past few years, and has been pretty rare, I think, the way that these things are set up. And it is also one of the very few services that allow us to get real data, helping us understanding, hey, why are people traveling and where they're going, in terms of understanding the demand, but also helping us to understand the supply, because given the RideACTA has accumulated a lot of the experiences in this area, understanding, hey, what type of, the two shuttle services and this way of routing people, this way of advising drivers to go around places could be potentially a good plan to get people to fill in the first mile, last mile mobility service gap, right? So what we do is in this project is we try to understand the problem, and then we look at the data that, again, this is very, very valuable data that RideACTA give us about demand and supply. So we look at the demand side. Hey, where are the people going? And namely those local employers, they get off the bus, mainline bus at IKEA stop, and then go to this last mile, first mile, go to their jobs. And these are the opportunity employment, most likely. And then they're very sparse, and we kind of know where they are right now using the data. On the other hand, it's the supply, because because the bus services comes every 20 or 30 minutes. And then we want to get people connected to those bus services so that sort of minimizing their waiting time. We also have the Robinson, you will hear a lot about the details about the network, the first mile, last mile service network, which is the roads in this area. We also think about the TNC, Uber, Lyft, because they are also in the area serving people, but in occasional conditions where the shuttle service, the first mile, last mile shuttle service may not be convenient for them to go to places to pick up a passenger. So in those cases, maybe we could think about having them to call for Uber service, while the whole first mile service will be paying for the Uber service, but in a way to lower the cost of running the entire first mile service. So we are considering all these options, right? And the top and really the overarching idea here is that can we consider providing such a better service, do a better design, strategy design for such a service, while the goal is to balance out the different stakeholders in this whole service. From user side, we want to minimize the user's cost, improving their traveling experience. On the agency, nonprofit agency or the system side, that we want to reduce the total system cost of running such a service. On the other hand, we also try to provide a best reliability in a sense, because these, most of the people are going to jobs, they can afford to be late. We want to make sure the service provided to them are reliable, not just on average it's okay, but we want to making sure it's reliable on a day-to-day operation. So the question here is that now we have all these background, we have the data, we have our goals, but the really question is that can we help at the strategy and planning level, what is the best shuttle service kind of fleet vehicle sizes given the demand and the supply? And then also we can explore a little bit about, hey, shall we provide really entirely on-demand services, or maybe we can combine the fixed and on-demand together. And then we also looking at the possibilities of stop aggregation. Sometimes the employers that people go to could be very sparse, but sometimes they can be also together in the same plaza, the box store, right? So it could be combined, these trips, so that we can reduce the cost and improving efficiency. We also look at the, complementing the first and last mile mobility services with buses and TNC Uber Lyft services together. Hey, can we really reduce the total system cost by doing so? Is it really efficient? When this is efficient, for what type of demand patterns? So these are the kind of questions that we are considering. And at the bottom level, any strategy design, any planning has to build on a pretty efficient or close to optimal operations, meaning that the vehicle, you have 2 vehicles or 3 shuttle vehicles, we have to route them on the fly in response to both advanced requests, people request ahead of time. We want to guarantee the requests that will be met, and also as well as those on-demand requests. Right. So we basically design a pretty efficient and close to optimum kind of vehicle routing algorithm to making sure that the whole system cost and the traveling and the user's cost both can be balanced, both together they can be minimized, and we integrate the operation with making sure it connected to the bus arrivals, 28X coming to the airport, making sure that people won't be wasting a lot of their times waiting the bus stop, just waiting for the next bus. Also making sure that if they are so, in different, the bus shuttle services, if they are not so close by their demand request, making sure that they could try to get the Uber Lyft services. That way, reduce not only benefiting these passengers, but also benefiting the entire system, right? So, so that's a very big picture of we leveraging the vehicle routing, optimal vehicle routing as an operation at the bottom level. And also on top of it, we try to design a better strategy and then planning for such a first mile, last mile services. And we have been using the data collected in Robinson Township. That's the service that RideACTA has been running for a couple of years in the past. We're very fortunate to have the data and to learn about the demand and supply and build a, hopefully a very general first mile, last mile services that hopefully we're trying to apply it to other cities, other regions in the long term. And then we try to also think about the commercializing it. And then the second part of the study, as Rick will go through it, is that right now RideACTA is thinking about offering a service in Moon Township, which is adjacent township next to the Robinson Township that has already had the service in the past few years. And we also, again, looking at the potential demand. We don't have the actual data, but we did some study about potentially estimating the demand and also thinking about the supply. And then we try to design ahead of time what could be the best type of service that we're providing to folks. All right. So Rick, maybe you can turn it to the next slide, and then next, then I think Rick will briefly tell the audience about what is some of the technical details and some of the main conclusions that we learned from this study.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So yeah, as Sean was saying, that was quite a lot of things to look at, but I'm going to drill down more into the specific study, and I'll briefly go over the study motivation in a more concise manner here. So basically, there's a first and last mile service in operation in Robinson where we get the ridership data and the shuttle trajectory data from RideACTA. They provided that data to us. And the first thing we want to do is just sort of quantify what's actually happening there and figure out sort of like a base level of service that is provided to the riders in the region. This new software provider has been storing this data for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so. So we're able to use this data to try to understand what's actually happening in Robinson Township. And once we do that, then we want to develop some sort of a model that is flexible, where we can try different operational strategies and compare some sort of service metrics with the base case that we computed in step 1 of the project. And obviously, for many of these projects, there are different trade-offs. We want to quantify these trade-offs in terms of user and agency costs and provide some sort of service recommendations for Robinson Township. So for example, if we want to add a 3rd shuttle to the service, that might improve wait times by, X%, but the cost would be, 33% more, right? So is that worth to make that decision? Is it worth it? And last, and the primary goal of this study is to sort of use this model that we developed for Robinson Township to suggest planning and operational strategies for this new Moon Township service that is proposed in a neighboring region with similar characteristics. And both are sort of commuter-based services, and they're connecting to the existing fixed route transit network in the Pittsburgh region. And so to help us quantify some of these level of service metrics, we developed 3 that we're going to be presenting in this presentation. So we have a user cost perspective, where it's some combination of wait and in-vehicle time incurred by the user. And we have a weighted combination where users perceive wait time standing outside waiting for the bus much higher than they do in vehicle time. So we'll talk about that in a future slide. We also quantify the agency costs, so the costs that RideACTA to provide the service, for example, paying for an Uber trip or hiring out a van. And then we also compare different reliability metrics in terms of wait and vehicle time for the riders. So I just want to quickly go over a little bit of background on this flexible transit. So flexible transit comes in many forms, but for the purpose of this, just sort of any sort of transit that's not fixed route. And so in the last, I don't know, 20 years or so, travel behaviors are changing based on demographic changes, socioeconomic trends, development patterns, and many of these regions are requiring more flexible modes of transit to serve their constituents. And as of 2010, over 40% of transit agencies have provided some form of flexible transit. And in the same study, they found that these flexible services can improve mobility, lower costs, and encourage mode shift in lower to medium density regions. In the last decade, as you all probably have witnessed, that emerging technologies such as Uber and Lyft, ride hailing, we're going to call them TNCs in this, which are transportation network companies. That's typically the term used in various reports and in academic research. But those have come on to the scene in the last 10 years, and many transit agencies are looking to maybe leverage some of these services and partner with them to provide better service to their riders or users. And in a recent survey, they surveyed 38 agencies that are already partnered with TNCs, and they found that 75% of them are looking to improve their first and last mile service as their primary partnership goal. And there's a new study that came out earlier this year, an early pilot study from the Dallas area rapid transit. And they had partnered with transportation network companies in low density areas. And they found that ridership increased with less costs and more coverage and less travel time to the user. So there's some background on this is becoming more of an option, and agencies are starting to look at this partnership. And so for that reason, and since Robinson and Moon Townships are both in lower density regions, we focused on this idea of integrating these ride-hailing or TNC services with the existing shuttle services that they provide. And we're looking at how this might impact user costs and can it reduce costs to the agencies, such as RideACTA. And as Sean previously mentioned, we also look at stop aggregation, nearby points within, say, 1,000 feet. You know, the users will incur an additional walking cost, but does that help the service improve in terms of overall system weight or in-vehicle time? And we also looked at, you know, combining a fixed route plus on-demand, maybe using fixed route between locations where we know there's going to be a lot of demand, and then using the on-demand service for more sparse, smaller business areas. For the focus of this presentation, we're going to focus on this integration of the existing shuttles and an Uber or Lyft-like service. But these other scenarios have also been looked at and can be provided in the report that we just submitted, and I'll give you the link to that later in the presentation. So a quick background, this is Robinson Township service area. This is a map, and basically this is a business sort of region, and there's an existing public transit fixed route service that connects downtown Pittsburgh to the airport, and it makes a stop in Robinson Township. And it stops at this yellow star here. This is the park and ride, or not really a park and ride, but it's at the IKEA. And all riders have to depart or arrive at this stop so that they connect to the existing fixed route service. And so right now, they're using two 23-passenger on-demand shuttles. It's approximately 6 square miles and about 200 businesses. All these red dots are locations of demand that we observed in the data. And so these are basically various corporate offices, hotels, small businesses, fast food, any sort of place that any sort of worker would commute to or commute from. As of now, the service provides about 150 to 200 trips per day, which is about 75 to 100 riders, because they would use the service for 2 trips per day. Some large businesses in the area are the FedEx corporate office, Ibex corporate, Walgreens, just to give you sort of an example. And they're using this Translock software that provides some routing advice, and it stores all the data for each ride request. So origin, destination, request time, pickup time, drop-off time, etc. So just a couple of plots to give you a feel for how the service sort of operates. Obviously, it's a commuter service. You can see that by the morning and evening peaks in the demand, and they peak at about 20 requests. So it's not that large of a service. We also plotted the 20 most popular trips in terms of travel time throughout the day. And you can see here that these trips are pretty short, right? Like the average is 3, 4, 5 minute trip length. But you can also see that there is some time variation, travel time variation throughout the day. And so we incorporate this variation into our simulation model to account for time-dependent travel times. And I want to briefly run through sort of how the simulation works. And we've designed it in a way to be as flexible as possible to try out many different scenarios. And so this is a public transit service. The fare is minimal. maybe I think 25 cents. So we're mainly interested in minimizing the total costs for the user. So, which is some combination of weight and in-vehicle time. And so for this study, we've selected this, the weighting for the wait time to be 0.75 and the weighting for the in-vehicle time to be 0.25. And this is based on previous research in 2005, where they say, you know, users perceive their wait time waiting for a bus about 3 times that of in-vehicle time for these short bus trips. And so the overall goal is to minimize user costs across the system. And so basically how the simulation works is you have a ride request come into the system, and then for each van or each shuttle that is in operation, we're going to figure out the best route incorporating that new rider. And so we would insert that rider into various locations throughout the van route and find the best route based on the sum of all the user costs. So all the current riders on that van, so their weight and in-vehicle time. And then we decide whichever van produces the smallest marginal cost, which is the additional weight and drive time costs for that new rider, we're going to assign that van to that rider. And so now that rider is in that van's route, and then they serve every rider in their van in subsequent fashion. The only difference here is when we integrate the Uber, Lyft, TNC services into the model, we're going to say as the request comes in, if the wait time, estimated wait time for that request is going to be greater than 5 minutes, we're just going to go ahead and assign that to an Uber or Lyft. We pick 5 minutes because the average wait time for these services in the Pittsburgh region is 5 minutes. Obviously that varies, but we pick that based on the average. And then once that rider is assigned to an Uber or Lyft, they incur a 5-minute wait time penalty, and we can calculate their travel time based on the travel times we've already calculated between all the different points in the network. And as far as agency costs, from the Uber, we pulled the Uber costs from their website because that's what we had accessible to us. But it's based on a minimum fare or some combination of this equation here based on distance traveled and time traveled. And as it turns out in Robinson Township, the trips are so short, they basically end up being the minimum fare almost all the time. And so that's roughly about $8 per trip. Whereas the shuttle costs are $51 per hour to provide those 23 passenger shuttles. So quickly, I just want to show, compare the simulation that we developed against sort of the raw data that we were able to download from the software. And as you can see, the simulations in red, and then the real data and the observed data are both forms of observed data. In the observed category, all we did was we used the trajectory data for the vans to help boost our confidence in the data that we're actually observing. There's a lot of issues with like recording the data. The driver has to click pick up and click drop off right when they pick up and drop off a person. Sometimes the drivers will swap trips between riders, and based on where they are and what they think will be better, but the data collection process. The data collection process didn't collect that. And also, oh yeah, okay, sorry. And as you can see here, the simulation provides a much better level of service in terms of a wait time here. But that's because they're not really capturing any of the travel behavior from the drivers, right? And the service is optimized, right? We're minimizing the combination of wait and drive times already. So we're going to see an improved service. So basically, it captures the temporal change of what we can observe to some extent, and we will be using this simulated model to test out various operational strategies. So, next slide. So in the previous slide, I showed wait and drive time, but to combine that into one metric, that's where now I'm plotting the user costs. So that's the combination of wait and drive time, where wait is valued at 3 times that of drive time. Now I'm comparing, using our simulation model, I'm comparing the 3 different supply scenarios, right? So our current situation is we have 2 vans operating out there. But now what if we took 1 van away and we use only 1 van? And when I refer to vans, these are the shuttles. These are the 23 passenger shuttles that we are currently using for the service. So if I reduce from 2 vans to 1 van, and then I use Uber or Lyft-like service to take care of the rest of the demand, that's sort of this scenario in green here. And then I also plotted for comparison only using TNC. So every ride comes in, we assign them an Uber, and we calculate the cost and the travel time based on just everyone having their own private Uber ride, essentially. And so as you can see here, if we reduce the service from 2 vans to 1 van plus TNC, the user costs actually do go up by 19%. But these are the agency costs. We can reduce the agency costs by 26% compared to the 2 vans. So like I was saying before, obviously there are trade-offs between any decision you make, and each agency has their own unique objectives. And so, yeah, we lose a little bit of user costs here, but we reduce agency costs by even more, right? And this is for the existing service. So we also compare, 50th percentile wait times for the 3 services, and the straight red line across at 5 minutes. That's because we're assuming an average wait time of 5 minutes for Uber. We don't really know the variability of that, but it's just more for comparison. But you can see that the 2 vans and the 1 van plus TNC scenarios are, pretty comparable across 50th percentile wait and in-vehicle times for all hours of the day. And then I also plotted the 95th percentile wait times. And you can see that the 2 van strategy here in green is a little bit worse during peak off-peak hours. This is likely because maybe one of the vans isn't working as much as, because there are less riders. But the 2 van case is still better during peak hours in the evening for wait times and drive times. But the difference isn't all that much, right? The biggest gap is, from 9 to 12 minutes or something between the 2 services. So, it's hard to say, you have to evaluate all these different trade-offs when making a decision, but the gap is not that big between the 2 van and the 1 van plus TNC strategy. So using that simulation that we've developed for Robinson, using actual data from demand data and vehicle trajectory data, now we want to look at how can we use this to make recommendations for Moon Township. So Moon Township is a neighboring region, and it's also along a Port Authority bus route. It's a commuter route called the G3, which follows this blue dash line up, and these green triangles are existing stops for the fixed route service, and it ends at this park and ride, this star here. And so what we're looking to do is provide a similar service that leaves and arrives at this park and ride for all the nearby businesses. And these are, I gave you some examples, which are office parks and airport hotels and Walmart. And this G3 service is a commuter service, so it only operates during peak periods of the day. So you're not going to see any of this first mile, last mile service happening during, say, off-peak periods because there's no access to the fixed route service. And so for this service route, it's about 6 square miles, similar to the Robinson Township. We estimate the demand to be much lower. There are a lot less businesses. This is further away from Pittsburgh. We're guessing, based on interviews with local businesses, maybe 40 to 60 trips per day, which would be 20 to 30 requests. So pretty small. And we don't have any data for this. So what we're going to do is, based on the Robinson data, where we know the demand is coming from what types of businesses, large businesses, airport hotels, like that percentage of demand coming from those. And so what we did was we said, 90% or so of the demand is going to originate from these large businesses or these red dots. And then the rest of the demand will come from these more sparse small businesses indicated by these blue dots throughout the map. And then we'll simulate maybe 100 different days of this demand and run the simulation to try to get some insights from the model. So since we don't know demand, we first looked at, what we thought the demand would be, say 20 requests per day and 30 requests per day. And we ran the same, supply scenarios for the Moon Township. And as you can see here, the 2 van case is optimal when the demand is really low. It can easily serve all the people and minimize the user costs. But as the demand starts increasing, you can see that the 2 different scenarios that involve TNCs or Uber and Lyfts become much better, especially in the or much more comparable, especially in the afternoon peak. And this is because the demand in the afternoon peak is originating throughout the whole service region. And so it's not like all the demand is coming from that park and ride where a van could pick up all those riders and serve them all. Now you have dispersed demand, and the value of sort of having a more flexible option is becoming more apparent. So I highlight this saying, calling these trips expensive trips, and I just want to quickly define that. Sort of like if a van has to make a large detour to pick up one trip, and they already have current riders on it, I would call that an expensive trip. For example, if you look at the previous map, if the van is sort of operating in this region of all these large businesses, and all of a sudden a request comes in from 18, which is Dick's Sporting Goods corporate office, since we can't reject any requests in this service, the van has to either decide to, go pick up this new passenger, minimize their wait time, and then come back and serve the rest, or it has to serve all their passengers before going out to serve the new passenger at Dick's Sporting Goods, and that would be a very high wait time for that passenger, right? And so what if we could just say, let's assign this one trip to an Uber or Lyft. They'll incur a 5-minute wait time penalty, and it'll cost, $8. But then the remaining route of that van will be much more optimized, right, for the rest of the passengers. So none of those passengers or passengers in the near future will be affected. And so that's sort of what we think that this simulation is highlighting. And so we are interested in that. And so instead of just doing 20 requests per day or 30 requests per day, well, actually, let me first go to the cost for this too, because we're evaluating these based on user costs and agency costs. So, this is just showing the cost to the agency to provide the service, right? So the vans are constant, they're $51 per hour, but then you'll have higher TNC costs as the demand goes up because you're paying for more trips essentially. But using the previous slide, we calculated that there's a 23% increase in user cost for the TNC plus 1 shuttle compared to the 2 shuttle scenario under 30 requests per day, right? But under the same amount of requests, it's actually a 65% increase in agency costs to purchase that extra shuttle or to rent out that extra shuttle compared to just using TNCs for the demand. So the cost is much higher for the agency. I mean, and like I said previously, that's a decision the agency has to make based on their current budget and what kind of service they want to provide. But so, like I was saying previously, we were interested in how these scenarios vary as a function of demand. And since we don't know the demand at this new location, we actually ran these simulations for 100 different days for all these different demand levels. And so on the left here, the figure is the average daily user cost, weight plus in-vehicle time. And then on the right is the average daily agency costs, which are, the costs to provide the service. And as you can see, once the demand starts getting close to 35 requests per day, the TNC are using TNC somehow, whether that be exclusively or with a van, is pretty comparable to the 2-van case. And this is because once there's enough demand, the 2-van case is going to be, both vans are going to be stressed. And then if one expensive trip comes in requiring the van to make a large detour, everyone's going to sort of feel that additional cost throughout the day. But having the ability to, this value of flexibility where you can assign a couple of these expensive trips to TNCs, you can help, mitigate that or the system cost due to those expensive trips. So from these figures, you can see at demand levels 35 requests per day or more, these scenarios perform similarly. But then you can look at the agency costs, and both TNC scenarios are well below the cost for for the 2-van case for all demand levels. So, sort of a conclusion from this is if, once demand reaches some certain level, maybe it makes more sense to start incorporating this more flexible on-demand service to help supplement the vans throughout the service period. So in addition, we also did a similar analysis for the 95th percentile wait times. As you can see, the 2-van starts climbing once demand hits about 30 requests per day, whereas both TNC scenarios remain relatively low. This is sort of based on our assumptions that they're incurring a 5-minute wait time penalty. Also, if an estimated wait time is greater than 5 minutes, we're just going to give it to a TNC. So it makes sense that these remain relatively constant compared to this 1 or 2-van cases. And I think one thing that's maybe unique to this region is like we are not allowed to not make a pickup based on if a request is really inefficient. So you can't reject any requests. And I know other agencies, you can reject requests. But in this case, since you can't reject requests, once demand rises to a certain level, vans, only having 1 or 2 vans sort of becomes insufficient to provide the level of service that you're looking for. So some just quick key takeaways is, services such as Uber and Lyft can provide some flexibility to these services by sort of offloading these expensive trips. And these are these trips with large detours that sort of affect not only the current riders of each shuttle, but future riders as well, because the van's going to be tied up busy for a longer period of time. And these trips are all very short, right? So the TNC trips are cost effective, I would say, or, they're $8 a trip. And if you're paying $51 an hour for a bus, you're able to provide over 6 trips an hour, which doesn't seem like a lot, but we're not, the peak period for Robinson was 20, so maybe that wouldn't work for there. But for these peak hour services, you might only need to provide service for 2 or 3 hours, but maybe you need to pay for the van for a minimum 5-hour shift, right? So that makes it even more cost effective. So now you're effective, you can effectively have over 10 TNC trips per hour for that same cost. And that's assuming that you're doing all the trips with the TNC, whereas you're not. I mean, you're using some combination, and hopefully you're you're assigning these expensive trips to TNCs in an effective way or an optimized manner, right? So, you know, the low demand, the TNCs outperform the shuttles. And then once you get to medium demand, maybe some combination of TNC and a shuttle, they can help reduce the agency costs and improve reliability. But we've observed that the user costs increase a little bit. But this is all assuming that we don't have or advanced requests for these rides. Like I was saying before, like 80% of these trips are not known in advance. But if we had some information on trips prior to when their scheduled pickup was, we can much more effectively assign TNCs to expensive trips. And I think these user costs would come down. I just want to highlight too that, you know, this is very similar to this previous study that I mentioned. This is an interesting report where a large transit agency is exploring some of these partnerships with TNCs, and this is so this comes through like the Federal Transit Agency, and here's a link to that report if anyone is interested, but I thought it's pretty interesting. Just briefly, a couple other study highlights. We looked at the stop aggregation. We didn't highlight it in the study, but you know, you have added costs due to walking, and we ended up finding that, you know, demand had to be quite high to make this feasible or make this better in terms of user costs, so over 80 trips per day. And we found something similar with fixed route plus on demand. You sort of needed enough demand at these large businesses to make the fixed route feasible. You know, if you have one shuttle dedicated to fixed route all day and the demand isn't there, it'd be much better served to go serve more of the on-demand locations. So we found that this sort of combination of fixed route plus on-demand didn't really make sense until, you know, the demand was 80 trips or more per day for the Moon Township. So if anyone's interested in looking at more of the specifics of the study or some of these other scenarios that we tested, we have put up the report at this link here. So the full report can be viewed if anyone is interested. And I just have a couple final comments. So a lot of these results are based on, you know, the assumptions that we made going into this. You know, we assumed that the app was integrated with a way to make these decisions in real time. So the request comes in and they want to assign it to an Uber, that all has to be integrated in one app. And that's not always the case, right? So you need one sort of platform to sort of use this integration technique. We also use average wait times for Pittsburgh, which is 5 minutes. This obviously varies based on location, time of day. So if we found that, you know, wait times in Robinson for Uber, for instance, are closer to 10 minutes per trip, then obviously these results would be very different, right? So we use this 5-minute average based on research that we have found in the past. So it's contingent on that assumption. We also, you know, for these Uber and Lyft-like services, if the demand is much higher than supply in the region, they push up the price through like some sort of a surge, they call it a surge multiplier, to try to match supply and demand in any given region. So, you know, these are low demand services, and if we're using an integration technique with shuttles, we don't anticipate having very high demand for TNC at any one specific time. But if there was, then some of these costs could go up, which would thereby, you know, produce much higher agency costs, right? And the last thing I wanted to mention is that as a request comes in, TNCs are assigned to that request based on their estimated wait time. If we had some advance notice of these trips, we can much more efficiently assign trips to TNCs in a more optimized fashion. But the way we have it now, you know, requests come in because they're not making advance notice, and I think that this integration technique would be much better, or scenario would be even better, if people were making these requests in advance. And so, final comments: we developed this flexible modeling framework to test the feasibility of various strategies with sort of an underlying optimal vehicle routing algorithm based on minimizing user costs. We find some general insights from 2 service regions in Pittsburgh, and we would anticipate some sort of similar results for other regions with similar spatial and demand characteristics. But these are unique to Pittsburgh in that we have the data for this very specific service region. Here are the references that I mentioned, some different studies and ones that we used in the research. And with that, thanks for your attention, and be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Thank you, Rick. I think I'm gonna quickly go through the chat record and just go from the question starting from Rick, and then Rick, feel free to chime in if you have any additional comment. All right. So the first question was, a taxi service a viable option for the travel market? Yes, Rich here. The really TNC is just a name. It can be taxi service. Actually, we also consider Z-Trip, as long as we know. Here the assumption is about the waiting time. Average TNC waiting time is 5 minutes, right? If we can call taxi service with X amount of average waiting time for the taxi to arrive, if we have this number, we can quickly evaluate it in this general platform, and then with, of course, some kind of the fare. I mean, depending on the average waiting time and depending on fare, we can see if this is going to be a good fit to the program or not. The second question from Catherine, 31 Robinson local route, and for now we are we're only considering 28X. 28X is the main corridor, kind of main bus line that make us stop at IKEA, and then all these demand, all the first mile consumer services, right? For now, we're only considering connecting people to their origin destination to the 28X IKEA stop. Of course, I mean the routing algorithm is very general. Like in the Moon Township case, that we actually consider not only the G3 but also the other local route. We can make sure that when the routing algorithm will take into consideration of these bus arrivals from multiple bus arrivals at the same real time on the fly. The next question, Andy was asking, does this assume that the monetary cost to riders remain 25 cents regardless of shuttle and TNC? Yes. So the algorithm will decide depending on what is the cost to the system and assign either a shuttle or TNC to a rider. The rider, with the same cost occurred to the rider. So they will pay 25 cents regardless. But if you're having a shuttle to pick up the rider, then the cost has been included in the shuttle. It's $51 per hour. But if it's TNC, then that will be additional cost. In this case, we assume $8 per trip because these are very short trips. Then that will be additional cost to the agency as part of when we quantify the agency cost. By the way, we have developed all the algorithms and we use the data to validate it in Robinson Township, and but we really haven't started commercializing it yet. At this point, we're still developing, actively developing the front end, and we have the algorithm ready. And in the ideal world, we want to find department partners or pilot studies to start deploying these vehicle routing algorithms, integrating TNCs to start to have real impact. Right now, the study is right now limited to just simulation and strategy design, making recommendations about the operations and the planning services.
And Sean, I just want to interrupt for a second because a couple questions came to me directly that I wanted to make sure, which are related to the TNCs, was vehicle accessibility, whether that's been guaranteed by the TNCs, how the TNC drivers would collect rider fares. Would riders need to worry about tipping the drivers for the trip? If the shuttles and the TNCs are used in conjunction, how will I know which vehicle to board? can individuals opt out of TNC service for people that would prefer to be on the shuttle? And is there a process to evaluate the environmental impact of potentially adding more single occupancy vehicles in that area?
So let me start with the TNC question. These are all great questions. The rider only pay 25 cents, right? That pays directly to the RideACTA. So if we assign a TNC to the rider, there's no upfront cost to the rider. But it's a now Uber, Lyft, they all provide some kind of API that allow someone to pay for someone else to take the ride using Uber, so that this person can use their smartphone, maybe not even smartphone, get a call or some kind of alert using their phone to see, hey, the vehicle is arriving, in the Uber vehicle is arriving to pick you up, and the license plate in 5 minutes or so. They have the real-time ETA, and that's how people know that they are assigned to TNC. If they assign it to the shuttle, then they should also be alerted that, hey, a shuttle X or Y is coming to you. So they can see very clearly. Again, there's no cost, no money exchange between the consumer, the rider, and the TNC or shuttle, right? Except that they are paying for 25 cents, which have the same, the current way of how they're paying for it. The vehicle, the TNC vehicle right now, because this is just a model, we haven't, like I said, we haven't really done any pilot study for the new system yet. So it is right now assuming we're not considering accessibility for those TNC, assuming they can take the TNC.
One thing to add though to that is like the shuttles are wheelchair accessible, and it's like if you request a ride through this service, it'll be very easily to denote whether or not they need this service, and you can just assign, like whether or not they're assigned to a TNC can be dependent on that. So if they can't use a TNC, then the shuttle will just pick up that rider, and the next rider that comes in will be possibly the same way. So like you can easily denote whether or not they need to use the shuttle or not based on when they request the ride.
Yeah, there could be an option that the user can specify for sure. The other question, the next question, I forgot about the environmental study question. Yes, I think that because we are monitoring on the fly all the vehicle trajectories and TNC locations, yes, we can estimate their environmental impact in terms of emissions and fuel consumptions. Maybe that means, Rick, we can, I think that's a very, very good suggestion. Maybe we want to integrate in our report as well, just to evaluate under different scenarios, what is the environmental impact in terms of energy emission. That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
And one other question that came in was whether just using TNCs was an option.
That is one of the options, right? So we can use the TNC entirely, but again, the main question, the conclusion was that if the demand is high in Moon Township case, for example, if we have more than 30 rides per day or something like that, then using the TNC only might be costly, and might not be, and you're not really getting any benefit of being relatively inexpensive comparing to if you hire a van to do the service. But then when the demand is high, then having the vans will be a better option generally than having TNC only. But I want to, Lisa, I want to go through this question before that, having a couple of viewers, and I know you have a couple of others. Here, Jan's question about 80% trips are known in advance. I saw. So all in our strike design, all these simulations, we assume all these demands are on demand, demand requests. So we don't know ahead of time. I mean, although they could tell us ahead of time, hey, I want to go to this place 7:05, but you don't need to. The vehicle will be routed in a way that as soon as it receives a demand request, and then we'll ask them its waiting time and assign the person to a vehicle. Everything is on demand. Although I think one of the things that we have been thinking about is if someone can request a demand ahead of time, let's say a day ahead, I think we could give some certain priority to this person because they let us know ahead of time. So we want to make sure his or her trip will be having the minimum possible waiting time, because he or him or her, that basically the trip, we want to guarantee whatever the best service we can provide to this person if they report their reserve the trip ahead of time, comparing to on demand.
Yeah, but maybe add really something to that too, for Jen's question. Of the Robinson data, 50% of the trips are leaving from IKEA, from the 28X bus. And so none of those trips are booked in advance. They show up and they wait and they get on the shuttle right at IKEA. And then many of the trips returning to IKEA, the requester requests the trip through the app as in an on-demand fashion, where the time they request is the same time of the time they wish to depart. So that's what when I said 80% of the trips aren't known in advance, they're not requesting a trip at noon to be picked up at 4. Only 20% of the trips are doing something like that. And if they all did that, it would be a much improved service for sure. So I just wanted to add that if it was confusing.
I think that's all the questions. Maybe do I miss anything? Is okay?
I'm looking now.
No, I think we got them, but I did want to ask Lynn and Amy about some of the questions that came up during the past couple minutes. Was there anything that you wanted to add from the service side of it and your experience in operating the service?
I guess, yeah, in terms of the question that was just asked, I think, it's sort of skewed because people who are coming from downtown and going somewhere in the airport corridor, they don't feel a need to make their reservation in advance because they know that the shuttle is going to be waiting there at IKEA. And we have tried to encourage them to reserve in advance, and some people do and most people don't. So that's kind of part of the issue there, but I think Rick explained it, actually. That's all.
Okay, that's great.
I see one other question from Richard that I could answer. He was, Richard, you're asking why not reduce the service area as opposed to reduce expensive trips, right? And I just want to go back. I use this example of, yes, this 18 out here. Yeah, of course, that's like a very easy example to highlight because it's totally going to mess up the service over here every time. So, I mean, we included that because we think that there is, like this company wants to use this service if possible. And so if we can get demand from the Dick's Sporting Goods corporate office, it'll increase ridership, right? And this one is a very obvious solution. If you cut that off, then efficiency throughout the rest of the region will be much better. But if you go to like Robinson Township, right? I mean, say the shuttle is operating up in the northwest corridor a bunch, and all of a sudden a ride comes in from a little bit south of IKEA. I mean, there's a lot of options there, and there's not an obvious way to cut this service area, but that would still be an expensive trip, right? So if the van is has 6 riders up in the northwest, to go all the way down and deal with 1 rider in the southeast would be, I guess, expensive, right? Maybe it would be cheaper just to give that ride like a taxi or something. That's sort of what I was trying to get at. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Hopefully.
Rick, we have one more question, possibly the last question about concerning the agency cost. Can you go to the slides? Maybe you can speak to the bar chart a little bit about the agency cost.
So the question is, well, I mean, it's different for the two, but let me pull this one up. So this is actually pretty, you know, the vans basically cost, you know, some amount per hour with the minimum shift length. And, you know, the TNCs are costing roughly between $8 and $10 per trip. And so we're just basically summing all those up, right? And in terms of Moon, you know, at this low demand, what's optimal is for only 20 requests per day, you might as well just use a taxi service for that, you know, because it's cheaper than even just having one van, right? But the reason why we keep contrasting it with the user cost is like, yeah, I mean, maybe TNC only is slightly cheaper in the 30 requests per day, but it has a much worse, like, there are a lot higher user costs because each rider gets a 5-minute wait time, right? And if you can have 1 or 2 vans serving the region adequately to make it so they have 0 wait time or 1-minute wait time, then that's better. So you sort of have to weigh the trade-offs. But, you know, for the Moon service, we, you know, the TNC only for these cases is optimal. And you could see here, as a function of demand, the TNC only becomes more expensive than the one van case at about 30 riders per day. And then it continues up because there's more trips. I don't know if that answers your question totally, but
yeah, so the other thing to consider is here, we make an assumption, right? So regards to peak hour, off peak hours, TNC is always 5-minute average waiting time and $8 to $10. But it might worse, you know, for the agency to make some kind of deal with Uber, Lyft, or Taxi Z-Trip services, making sure there are enough supply for the riders, because if not, then the Uber could have surge prices during peak hours, and that would be way more expensive than $10, and the waiting time could be a lot more than 5 minutes. Then that can change the entire picture of the numbers we're providing here. Just something to keep in mind that kind of based on our assumption. Okay. So I do think that that's pretty much all the questions. Lisa, okay, maybe we can wrap up.
Yes, I would like to thank everybody for being part of this session today. We will be, assuming everything works technologically, we will be able to share a link to this video recording if you would like that. If you would like to know more about these, the Smart Mobility Challenge, about RideACTA, or about the work that Rick and Sean talked about today, get in touch and we will be very happy to have continued conversation. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Lynn and Amy, Rick and Sean, and we wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.